An exhausted dog and its puppy were found in a snowstorm. The man decided to open the door, but the snowstorm howled through the small town, blanketing everything in a thick layer of white. The wind was fierce, lashing against windows and creating an eerie symphony of whistling and thudding. Jack, a retired forest ranger, sat by his fireplace, sipping hot coffee and flipping through an old book. His log cabin stood isolated at the edge of the forest, far from any neighbors. It was the kind of night where no one dared to venture outside. Suddenly, a faint scratching sound interrupted the quiet crackle of the fire. Jack frowned, setting his mug down. He listened carefully. There it was again, scratching, coupled with a faint, pitiful whimper. Curious and slightly alarmed, he grabbed his flashlight and opened the door. The icy wind hit him like a slap, and snow swirled into the cabin. In the dim glow of the porch light, Jack saw two figures huddled together. It was a dog, a large, shaggy one, and a tiny, trembling puppy pressed against its side. Their fur was matted with ice, their eyes pleading. They looked exhausted, barely able to stand. The mother dog whimpered softly, as if begging for help. Jack's heart ached. He knew the dangers of letting unknown animals into his home, especially in such extreme conditions, but he couldn't just leave them there. "All right," he murmured, stepping aside to let them in. "But just for the night." The dog hesitated, glancing back at the storm as though expecting something or someone. After a moment, she nudged her puppy forward and limped inside, collapsing onto the warm wooden floor. Jack quickly shut the door and grabbed a towel to dry them off. The puppy wagged its tiny tail, its eyes lighting up at the sudden warmth. As he tended to them, Jack noticed something unusual. The mother dog had a crude leather collar around her neck, worn and faded but clearly handmade. He examined it closely and found a tiny, engraved metal tag. The name Luna was etched into it, along with a series of numbers. "You must belong to someone," Jack said aloud. But who would leave their pets out in such a storm? Throughout the night, Jack tried to piece together the story. Luna seemed restless despite her exhaustion. She kept glancing at the door, her ears twitching at every sound of the wind. The puppy, on the other hand, had fallen asleep by the fire, blissfully unaware of the chaos outside. Around midnight, just as Jack was dozing off in his chair, a loud thud startled him awake. Luna sprang to her feet, growling low. Jack grabbed his flashlight and cautiously opened the door again. Standing in the snow, barely visible in the swirling storm, was a man. His face was pale, his clothes tattered, and he leaned heavily on a wooden staff. He looked like he'd been wandering for days. "Luna," the man croaked, his voice weak. The dog barked once, a sound of recognition, and rushed past Jack to the man's side. Jack quickly pulled the man inside, shutting the door against the storm. The man collapsed onto the floor, clutching Luna like a lifeline. His story unfolded slowly, between sips of hot tea that Jack prepared. His name was Eric, and he had been hiking with Luna and her puppy when the storm struck. Disoriented and unable to find shelter, he had sent Luna to find help while he struggled to keep moving. "She saved my life," Eric whispered, stroking Luna's fur. Jack nodded, glancing at the dog, who now lay contentedly beside Eric. "You're lucky she found my cabin," he said. As the storm raged on outside, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the bond between the man and his dog. It was a reminder of how loyalty and love could triumph, even in the harshest of conditions. As the storm intensified outside, Jack prepared the spare room for Eric to rest. Luna and her puppy curled up beside him, their exhaustion evident. Despite his fatigue, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than Eric had revealed. Before heading to bed, Jack checked the collar again. The numbers engraved on it nagged at his mind. They weren't just random, they looked like coordinates. "What were you and Luna really doing out there, Eric?" Jack wondered aloud, staring at the stormy night through his frosted window. In the shadows, Luna's ears twitched, and she let out a low growl. Something or someone was still out there. The uneasy growl from Luna jolted Jack back to reality. He grabbed his flashlight and peered out the window. Snow continued to fall heavily, but through the storm, he thought he saw movement, dark shapes shifting just beyond the tree line. Luna stood, her body tense, and her eyes locked on the door. The puppy whimpered and pressed closer to Eric, who was too weak to notice the change in the dog's behavior. Jack hesitated. "It's probably just the wind," he muttered, though he didn't believe it himself. Grabbing his old rifle from the mantel, he glanced at Luna. "Stay here. I'll check it out." The storm swallowed Jack as he stepped outside, the cold biting through his coat. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but swirling snow. Yet he felt eyes on him, watching, waiting. From inside the cabin, Luna barked urgently, and Jack realized too late that he wasn't alone. Jack spun around, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The dark shapes he had glimpsed earlier were now closer, almost circling him. His pulse quickened as his breath clouded in the icy air. He could barely make out what they were: large, shadowy figures with glowing eyes. Wolves. Luna's barks grew louder from inside the cabin, a mix of warning and desperation. Jack backed toward the door, his rifle raised. But the wolves didn't attack. They stayed just out of reach, their glowing eyes fixed on him. One wolf stepped forward, larger than the rest, with a thick, dark coat and a scar slashed across its muzzle. It growled low, the sound vibrating through the snow-laden air. But instead of lunging, it stopped and sniffed the ground. Jack's flashlight caught a glint of something around its neck, a crude collar, much like Luna's. "What the hell is going on?" Jack muttered, gripping the rifle tighter. Suddenly, a loud whistle pierced the storm, sharp and commanding. The wolves froze, their ears perking up. Then, to Jack's shock, they turned and disappeared into the trees as if summoned. The scarred wolf lingered for a moment, its glowing eyes meeting Jack's, before it too vanished into the storm. Jack stumbled back into the cabin, slamming the door shut. His heart pounded as he leaned against the wood, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Luna was on her feet, pacing anxiously. Eric, pale and visibly shaken, was sitting upright now, his eyes wide. "They found us," Eric whispered, his voice trembling. Jack stared at him. "Who found you? What's going on? And why does that wolf have a collar like Luna's?" Eric hesitated, then let out a long sigh. "You deserve the truth. Luna and I weren't just hiking. We were running. Running from what?" Jack pressed, his voice sharp. "Not what. Who?" Eric's gaze dropped to the floor. "The wolves, they're not ordinary. They're trained. They belong to a group. Dangerous people. I was part of them once. We did things I'm not proud of. When I tried to leave, they sent the wolves after me." Jack's stomach twisted. "And Luna?" "Luna was my partner," Eric said, stroking her head. "She helped me escape. The collar she wears, it's a tracker, but I disabled it. Or at least I thought I did." "Running from what?" Jack pressed, his voice sharp. "Not what. Who?" Eric's gaze dropped to the floor. "The wolves, they're not ordinary. They're trained. They belong to a group. Dangerous people. I was part of them once. We did things I'm not proud of. When I tried to leave, they sent the wolves after me." Jack's stomach twisted. "And Luna?" "Luna was my partner," Eric said, stroking her head. "She helped me escape. The collar she wears, it's a tracker, but I disabled it. Or, at least, I thought I did." Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. "So they've been tracking you this whole time?" Eric nodded. "They want something I took from them. Something important. If they get it back." He trailed off, glancing at the puppy, who yawned innocently by the fire. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. "So they've been tracking you this whole time?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "What is it, Eric? What are you hiding?" Eric hesitated again, then reached into his coat. From an inner pocket, he pulled out a small, metal cylinder, no bigger than a pen. It gleamed faintly in the firelight. "This," Eric said, holding it up. "It's a prototype. A piece of advanced tech that could change everything if it falls into the wrong hands. I stole it to stop them, but they'll kill to get it back." Before Jack could respond, Luna barked sharply, her ears flattening. The door rattled as if something or someone was outside again. The wolves were back. And this time, they weren't alone. The door rattled harder, the thudding sound reverberating through the small cabin. Luna growled, her body tense and protective as she placed herself between Eric, the puppy, and the door. Jack grabbed his rifle and glanced at Eric. "If they want this so badly, why didn't you destroy it?" Jack demanded, his voice low but firm. Eric shook his head. "I can't. It's more than just technology, it's information. If destroyed, it could trigger an automated failsafe, sending its contents to them anyway. Keeping it intact is the only way to stop them." Jack gritted his teeth. "Great. So now we're sitting ducks." A loud crash interrupted their conversation. The window shattered as a wolf leaped through, snarling. Luna launched herself at the intruder without hesitation, her teeth bared. The two animals collided in a blur of fur and fury. Jack raised his rifle, but before he could fire, another crash came from the back door. More wolves were forcing their way in, their glowing eyes eerily intelligent. "We need to move," Jack shouted, grabbing Eric by the arm and pulling him to his feet. Eric winced but nodded. He stuffed the metal cylinder into his coat and scooped up the puppy, who yelped in fear. Luna, despite her injuries, fought off the first wolf and growled at the others, holding her ground. "She won't last if we stay here," Jack said, his voice grim. Eric hesitated, looking at Luna. "She'll follow us. She always does." Jack flung open the back door, the storm raging outside. The icy wind bit at their faces as they stumbled into the snow. Luna barked once, fiercely, before disengaging from the fight and bolting after them. The group plunged into the forest, the snowstorm making visibility almost impossible. Jack led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Behind them, the howls of the wolves grew louder, closer. "Where are we going?" Eric shouted over the wind. "There's an old ranger station up ahead," Jack called back. "It's got a secure bunker. We can make a stand there." Luna ran alongside them, her body low to the ground, ears pinned back. She growled occasionally, glancing behind them to check the pursuit. As they reached the station, Jack fumbled with the keys, his hands numb from the cold. The howls were deafening now, the wolves closing in. Finally, the door creaked open, and they stumbled inside. Jack slammed the door shut and slid a heavy iron bar across it. "This will hold them off for a while," he said, his breath coming in gasps. The group huddled in the main room, their breaths visible in the cold air. Eric clutched the puppy tightly, his face pale and drawn. Luna lay at his feet, panting but alert. "What now?" Eric asked, his voice trembling. Jack didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the metal cylinder in Eric's coat. "If they're willing to send wolves and risk a storm for that thing," he said slowly, "then whoever's behind them won't stop here. We need a plan. And we need it fast." Before Eric could respond, the door shuddered violently. The wolves were here, and this time, they wouldn't leave without what they came for. The cave loomed ahead, a dark refuge in the blinding storm. Jack pushed himself harder, adrenaline coursing through his veins as the snow stung his face. Behind them, Luna's fierce growls and the wolves' snarls echoed through the storm, but they were getting closer. Almost there, Jack shouted to Eric, urging him forward. Eric's face was pale with exhaustion, but he nodded, clutching the puppy tightly. Luna was still holding her ground, her powerful form cutting through the blizzard, but it was clear she was slowing. Jack felt a pang of guilt as he saw her struggling, but there was no time to turn back. As they reached the cave's entrance, Jack was the first to duck inside, pulling Eric and the puppy in after him. The cave was cold, the air damp and thick with the scent of earth and stone. The howling wind outside grew muffled as they descended into the shadows of the cave, the snow-covered entrance, now sealed behind them. Jack took a moment to catch his breath, scanning the cave. It was a large, jagged cavern with narrow tunnels branching off in various directions. It wasn't the safest place, but it was a temporary refuge. "We need to find cover," Jack said, his voice low. "They won't give up that easily." Eric, still panting heavily, nodded, but his eyes kept darting back toward the entrance. "What about Luna?" he asked, his voice thick with worry. Jack hesitated, his hand resting on his rifle. "She'll be okay. She's tough. We have to keep moving." But just as Jack turned to lead them deeper into the cave, a low growl echoed from the darkness. Luna's form appeared from the shadows, battered but alive. Her fur was matted with blood and snow, but she had fought her way into the cave. Behind her, the first of the wolves slipped into the cave, their glowing eyes scanning the dark for their prey. "Go!" Jack shouted. Luna lunged at the approaching wolf, her teeth sinking into its neck with brutal precision. The wolf yelped in pain and tried to claw its way free, but Luna held on, refusing to let it go. "We don't have time for this," Jack snapped. Eric was already moving, pushing forward into the depths of the cave. Jack fired a warning shot, hoping to scare the wolves away, but the sound of gunfire only seemed to fuel their frenzy. They charged forward, their growls deafening in the tight space. "This way," Jack shouted, motioning for Eric to follow him down a narrow tunnel that veered off to the left. They ran, the sound of claws scraping against stone growing closer. Jack's heart raced as he glanced back, praying they wouldn't be cornered. The tunnel was tight, forcing them to move quickly and quietly. It led them deeper into the cave, away from the wolves and hopefully toward a place where they could regroup. But as they rounded a corner, they came to a sudden halt. The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber, its walls covered in strange markings and symbols. In the center of the chamber, a stone altar stood. The shadows in the cave seemed to shift, and an unnatural chill filled the air. Jack's breath caught as he realized what they were dealing with. From the darkness ahead, a massive shape slowly emerged. At first, it was only a silhouette, but as it stepped into the dim light, Jack could see its true form. Towering and hunched, with glowing eyes that burned with an otherworldly fire, the creature was ancient, its body covered in scales and fur, its jaws wide and sharp. It was not just any predator, it was a guardian. "What the hell is that?" Jack hissed, his mind racing. Eric took a step back, his face pale. That's the guardian of the cave. It was sealed away long ago. The altar was meant to keep it trapped here, but The creature let out a deafening roar, shaking the very foundation of the cave. Luna barked fiercely, but she was no match for the beast. "We have to stop it," Jack shouted, raising his rifle. But he knew a gun would be useless against something like this. The creature's eyes locked onto them, and it snarled, its massive form charging toward them with terrifying speed. "The cylinders!" Eric suddenly shouted. "It's the key. It has to be." In a frantic panic, Eric reached into his coat and pulled out the small metal cylinder. He sprinted toward the center of the chamber, holding it high. The creature stopped in its tracks, eyes narrowing as if sensing something. For a moment, there was a tense silence. Jack watched in disbelief as Eric placed the cylinder in the air, directly above the spot where the altar had been. A strange, magnetic energy pulsed from it, sending a shockwave through the cave. The creature howled in rage, its massive claws scraping against the stone floor. The air grew thick with energy, and Jack felt as if the entire cave was alive, pulsing with power. The walls around them began to crack, and the ground trembled once more. "Do it!" Jack shouted to Eric, his voice barely audible over the roar of the creature. Eric, his face twisted with determination, slammed the cylinder down onto the cracked stone floor, releasing a blinding light. The creature shrieked, a sound so horrible it rattled Jack to his bones. The light engulfed the beast, wrapping it in an ethereal glow. The growl turned into a scream of agony as the creature began to dissolve into the air, its form flickering, breaking apart. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature vanished. The cave fell silent, the energy in the air dissipating as if it had never been. Jack stood, breathless and stunned, staring at the empty space where the guardian had stood. Eric, shaking, dropped to his knees. Luna whined softly, her tail between her legs, and nuzzled against Eric's side. What did you do? Jack asked, his voice a mix of awe and fear. Eric slowly stood, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. I think I released it, but I also contained it again somehow. The cylinder wasn't just a map. It was a lock. The Guardian was sealed away to protect what lies deeper in the cave. But now it's over. Jack looked around at the strange markings on the walls. The power in the air had faded, but the mystery of the cave still lingered. What was it guarding? He asked, though he already had an inkling that Eric didn't have the answers. Eric took a deep breath, looking toward the depths of the cave. Something far worse. Something that was never meant to be unleashed. The cylinder, it wasn't just a key. It was a warning. Jack felt a chill crawl down his spine. What now? Eric glanced at Luna, then at the puppy, his face hardening. Now, we leave. And we make sure no one ever finds this place again. With a final, lingering glance at the cave's entrance, they turned, leaving the chamber behind. The storm outside had finally begun to ease, but the world had changed. Whatever was in that cave, whatever had been set in motion, would not be forgotten. And so the story ended.
For now.
The end.